the post-production on this puppy is nothing. It's a half hour. It's crazy.
I'm your host, Charlie Latham, and welcome back to another episode of the Podcast for Podcasters podcast. Today with us, we have Bingo, host of Halfway Okay, a weird, rad comedy talk podcast. Hey, Bingo, how you doing?
Hey, man, how's it going?
Yeah, it's going very well. I'm happy to have you on the show and to hear a bit more about your show. If you start a bit
Happy to be
by
here.
introducing to the listeners who you are and what your show's about, that'd be great.
So I'm Bingo. That's not my born Christian name, but that's what I decided to go as a bit, and then it stuck. So I'm just gonna go with it. I do a weird podcast that's just kind of I don't even know what to say that it is. It's very hard to tell people like, oh, it's because I don't have like a niche topic that I'm exploring. It's just kind of like mildly narcissistic, just acting weird, talking about my day and experiences. But there's a puppet. I don't know. It's weird. It's a weird show.
So how did it get started? What made you start the show?
I mostly just like needing a creative outlet in some sort of way, needing some sort of way to express myself, some just way to scream into the void that was a little like more satisfying than social media, Twitter, and all that. And it started originally as like a weird YouTube channel that I was doing back in like 2010. That was like I don't know what I was doing. It was like almost mildly a kid's show. It was kind of a little Pee Wee Herman-ish. I don't know what it was, and that didn't last very long because I was just like, it became a lot of effort, and then I did nothing with it. And then me and my good friend who did a couple of videos back then in 2017, we decided to go ahead and do an audio version of it, but just do it like a podcast, which wasn't like a weird kid show. It was just us being weird and trying to make each other laugh and trying to trip each other up. And then we stopped doing that like around 2020-ish, something like that. I think it was like a little bit before COVID like hit. And then just recently I brought it back, and I can't think of a better name than Halfway Okay because I like it. And so I brought it back as like a live podcast on Twitch that has live call-ins, which is exciting because that there's an element of weird like risk there and just like spontaneity that I really like to mess with. I'm ashamed to admit I have a slight improv background, so I think that's trained me to like be able to react to things in a cool way, which is fun, or at least I'm decently good at doing that. I don't know if it's a fun thing, but
Nice. I'd love to dive into the live audience participation a bit more because that sounds absolutely terrifying to me. Obviously, there's only so much planning you can do. I guess you don't really know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I guess your improv training has helped a lot with that. But how else have you kind of managed that? What difficulties have you faced?
Honestly, I think it has a lot to do with the way that the show was done for years with my previous co-host Danny. We would both not talk to each other at all, like when it came to what we were going to plan for that episode. And we would purposely do stuff to, like, I don't know, kind of egg each other on or get on each other's nerves a little bit or trip each other up, right? And I'm easily, like, I'm an emotional guy. I'm always high strung. It's very easy to set me off and get me on another tangent and stuff like that. So I think there's comedy in that. And then just the element of danger and risk of not exactly knowing that just because I came up with these handful of segments and this couple of points I want to come to during this episode, I may not get to all of them. It might go on a complete other tangent because somebody called in and started talking about something else, and I love that. I think that's very exciting. It harkens back to like I guess old talk radio, not that I have a ton of experience listening to a lot of that because most of that was just like, I don't know, coast to coast and like Howard Stern, and both of those don't keep my interest for that long. But it's just a fun way to do a show, and I don't think a lot of people do it because obviously it's streaming on Twitch. If somebody were to call in and just like say a slew of awful hate speech, well, I'm one that sucks because I don't want that, and for like ethical reasons, because I don't agree. But also like then you're banned from Twitch. So it's I have like an approval process for people that are able to call in.
Okay.
But were this show to actually like have a larger audience, that the risk starts to increase. If I start making enemies, that risk starts to increase, and I find that exciting. I think it's just fun. I
So
don't know.
how does that approval process work? How do you make
It's
sure
pretty
you
much
don't?
people. Yeah, it's so automatically people that I know in real life are automatically, I call it the sweetie list, are automatically added to the sweetie list, and it's a fancy way of just saying I have their numbers in my Google Voice address book, and I can see, oh, it's Desiree calling. Cool, I'll let her in. And then I don't answer calls that I don't know, right?
Mhm.
um and pretty much, so people that I know that I've known for years, that I've listened before, and just people that I, that have just been following for a while, that I may not even know that well or at all in real life, that listen to the old show and that are listening to this, and they're like, I have a mailing list that I'll see their email address. I'll be able to correlate, oh, that's this guy. Yeah, I'll add him to the thing, and I'll send an email that's saying like, hey, would you like to join the sweetie list? If so, what's your name, pronouns, what's your number? Please agree not to be a maniac, and then you can call whenever you want. And here's the number. Not that it's that coveted. You could probably find it from old episodes if you're really a maniac. But yeah, it's a weird thing I'm doing. I don't know.
That sounds like a good way to do it. Though it sounds like you've made it quite manageable having that live
Yeah.
interaction. To go back a bit to what you were saying earlier, how has it changed hosting the podcast yourself rather than with a co-host that you were doing prior?
Yeah, it's changed a lot, because he brought, and he'll still call in or leave weird voicemails. He's now like added a cast of weird characters that he's called in with to just be weird and disruptive, which is great. I love him. He's honestly one of the funniest people I've ever met in my life. And it's no bad blood or anything like that. It's just scheduling, and just everything else is just like, this makes more sense for me to do it consistently as one person. So I find that I have to like come up with a lot more stuff, because I usually leaned on him for coming up with stuff, or at least for us to be able to have like a banter back and forth to kind of eat up time. I don't believe in doing a podcast that's shorter than like an hour and 20 minutes for some reason. I have to make them go long. Um, so filling that time is important, and I don't want to fill it with just like, stupid stuff. Like, I want it to be like at least entertaining. I don't know if I'm answering your question right. How
No,
did it change? Yeah.
no, you answered it well. So it's easier to schedule when you don't have to schedule two of you in, but you have to come up
Yes.
with a lot more ideas yourself.
Yes. But as a result, let me tell you, man, the post production on this puppy is nothing. It's a half hour. It's crazy, between not having to deal with someone who refuses to use proper mic etiquette, which I got to him all the time, but he's a little jerk and he wouldn't do it. Anyway, so having to change his levels, and honestly, even not even obsessing so much on that stuff in this, and actually learning what like noise gates and stuff are, and like real-time compression. I do all my audio recording through OBS, which is what I use to stream to Switch. It does a gorgeous job, and I have no issues. And literally, it's me cutting out the pre-roll, maybe editing a breakdown so it's not so long, and then putting it out to YouTube. And then a couple of like liner notes, to add like, oh, this is what Bingo talked about this episode. It's seriously a half hour. It's
God,
awesome. What
it's
used to be like, what some of the episodes you've had before, where people are talking about like, oh yeah, for an hour episode, I'll spend like 6 hours on it because I have to go through every single minute. And I'm like, homie, I used to do that. Don't. And it was like, I used to not necessarily watch for ums and breaths, but I would obsess over that and get to the levels like that, but not anymore. And I think it sounds technically, it all sounds good with this current setup I'm doing.
God, there's so much I want to touch on what you've just said because I've watched the
Absolutely,
show
yes, please.
and the post production doesn't look like you spent half an hour on it. One of my questions was going to be, for a 2-hour show, how do you possibly have enough time to do all the editing? As you've said, it doesn't take almost as long as I would have imagined.
Yeah.
To start, oh god, there's so many directions I want to take this. To start with, I'll go to what you were saying about mic etiquette, though. If you could
Yeah.
talk a bit more about mic techniques, tips for that'd be great.
Yeah, pretty much just kind of like and I'm not by no means am I a pro or am I doing things right. I currently can't hear myself in my headphones because there would be a delay and I don't know how to fix that and I would drive me crazy. So I just learned how with this particular mic or like the mics we were using there were like Shure SM58s, which are like dynamic microphones. You basically have to eat the mic a little bit. And when you're going to yell, obviously go back like this, pull away from the mic. But just like not be afraid of talking into the mic. And when you get more quiet, getting all creepy with the mic and all close to kind of get that weird intimate feeling and raise the hackles on people's ASMR like brains. But he and even other guests, we would have other guests come in and they would just they wouldn't talk into the mic. It's pretty much just not talking into the mic. You have to just talk into the mic because I mean it will pick you up. But then that poor schmo who's trying to listen to your podcast and they're driving, oh man, any kind of road noise. If you're back here talking like this, oh yeah, man, that's cool, that's neat. They're gonna hate your show and they're gonna switch it up. I've done it before on shows that I like, but that little bit of like inconsistent audio, it just shows like a certain amount of like unprofessionalism and not caring about no empathy for the end user, right? I'm a graphic designer also as my real job, so I have a UI UX kind of a thing, and I'm always thinking about like who's that end user, how are they ingesting it, do they hate this experience? They will absolutely hate the experience for the content that I make, but but at least it'll sound good and look okay. I think we'll see. But.
So for going back to the post-production again, so for people who haven't seen your show, as you were saying, it's very long form content. It's sort of 2 hours, you riffing away, doing some different bits, some different segments. The episode I saw you, the segment came in, which was getting to know Bruce, and Bruce was a little gremlin that you'd created. So was that pre-recorded, the Bruce puppet gremlin?
Oh no. So he's a back in like 85, 86, there was this toy line called Boglins, which are these weird rubber puppets. And I've had Bruce for a long time and I really love him and he's very cute. And so that's where he comes from. If you can kind of picture, if anyone knows what a boglin is, they're weird 2-armed little creature things. I love them. No, that is literally I'll show you. That is literally a set that I have next to me at all. And I have a camera that switches back and forth. I have a couple of I have an Elgato Stream Deck that helps me switch between the cameras. There's all kinds of products that can help you do that. I didn't think it was going to be like an easy mark for the Elgato system, but I just got a floor pedal today that will help me switch between the cameras better. I'm a maniac for how little listeners I have, how much I've spent already on this stupid show. But but no, that's just me off, on the side here, switching cameras back and forth and changing voices on the fly. Sometimes you can catch me screwing up the voice, but yeah. So I come up with a couple bits and yeah. Anyway, sorry. Go on.
And is that the same with all of the sound effects that I hear in the show?
Yes, it's all from this Stream Link, which is like these little programmable buttons. Again, this isn't great for your audio format, but I'll show you what it is in the camera.
That's okay.
It's like these little
so
glowy
it's like
buttons.
8 buttons and 4 knobs and a little display there.
Yeah, but then you can switch. There's like different pages of buttons, and so you can have like so many different presets on this. Wow. So I have just like, I'll have an idea for like, oh, I really want to add, I don't know, from the old Konami Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle arcade games. The Cowabunga stuck in my head one day, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna find that on the internet and put it on my Stream Link, so then I can just mash Cowabunga during the stream and have that as a sound bite. And you can set it up to do like, there was one episode where I was for some reason really into Spring Break, and there was another button I could set that did certain settings in OBS that would like completely like put like a video overlay that said Spring Break and play all this music and have weird lights and stuff. It's a really powerful, cool little device. I've been very impressed with it.
And what's that called again?
The Stream Deck from Elgato. Elgato makes all like the capture cards and stuff like that for like Twitch streaming and stuff like that, which I've tried to do. Also, I've tried streaming video games. I hate it. It's so stressful. It's more you're saying having a live show is stressful. It's more stressful for me to like play Animal Crossing or ActRaiser and try to like come up with, oh man, is this entertaining, and like worrying about that when I'm just trying to play a video game. But for some reason, having the chat going, the people calling in, having to go over here and and be a puppeteer at the same time, that for some reason that is fine for me. I don't know what's wrong with me, but yeah.
Your brain must be able to run at a million miles an hour.
Something like that.
So with the show notes as well, you include in there all of the different topics that you've talked about in the show. Is that
Yes.
from memory? Do you write that down as you're recording?
So part of my process, my post-production, I'll end the stream, and then I'll just start, I'll get the video, and I'll edit out the couple of parts that need to come out, which is again usually just the pre-roll, and then I'll usually shorten down the break segment, and then I'll just either watch the video back while it's rendering out a video file to go up to YouTube, or listen to it in MP4 version, and kind of like just kind of, oh, not like a 2x speed or something like that, but just like, okay, yeah, cool. Then I talk about this. Okay, and then I'll fast forward a little bit. I also have like my show notes, which is kind of the segments that I wanted to get to during the so kind of, yeah, it's kind of juggling a few things. I'll have like what the notes I was using during the show up to the left. I'm envisioning this in my head. Up to the left, the current document I'm at in the middle, and then have the video to the right. And I'll just kind of fast forward when I know, like, oh, I know how long I talk about, Power Rangers or whatever, and I'll go ahead and skip forward. And it goes pretty quickly typically.
And also with the titles for such long such a long formatted show, how do you come up with the titles?
That's like the that's like the most stressful part. Before, with Danny, we would go back and forth on the titles, because I would usually have like a day, maybe a day and a half, 2 days of me just like after work editing things down and getting them where they were. And once I was done, rendering out the MP4 file after the edit, I would send it over to Danny, and I would have like, here's some show titles that I think would be appropriate. And he was like, no, I think Horse Coffins is clearly the one that we need for this one. I'm like, all right, I guess we won't. So I wish I still had that, because I don't feel like my titles have been the best, but it's usually just something funny said during the show. Which actually, I think the most recent show was Jill Taylor Denham, which was something that Danny said when he called in. Jill Taylor being the popular mother figure from Home Improvement, a fine conservative 90s sitcom starring Tim Allen. Watch it today. It's very bad, but yeah.
Amazing. So I was seeing that you're on, I think, your 147th episode. You're about to hit 150.
Yes. Yeah.
What an achievement. That's pretty exciting.
Thanks. I wish there wasn't such a gap in between the audio and then this new form. And I had considered just starting fresh and starting new, but I was like, man, there's so much legacy and there's so much stuff I want to borrow from that old lore and that old, like, energy, that I kept it. But yeah, 147. I'm impressed by that. I didn't think we were ever even going to make it to 50 back in the day, but we did.
So
a lot of work.
Have you got any plans for the 150th?
I did not even cross my mind. Did not even until you mentioning it, and I'm like, oh shit, I better have a couple things set up. So yes, of course, there's a huge something amazing for the 150th. You won't believe it. You'll be really impressed.
But you'll have to wait and see.
Oh yes. Oh boy, I've been planning it for a long time. It's gonna be great.
Amazing. So in the almost 150 episodes that you've had, have you had any particular ones that have performed well, that have attracted more listeners than others, or has it been a kind of steady, gradual thing?
You know what? Yes. And this is actually a weird, like, there is this person that we covered a long time, several times in the old form of the show, and then recently in this new format. He's this weird YouTube personality that's just kind of like, he's such a character. His name's Rich Life of Road Trips. Check him out. he's fascinating. He's such a character. And there were times where we were interacting with his world, and not being very nice to him, which there's a lot of conflicting moral things with that, because I don't feel like we were punching down, but we were definitely punching sideways and maybe a little down. But also he sucks. He's such a bad guy. But so it's very complicated. I've decided in this, now we're going forward, I'm not messing with Rich Life anymore. But during there was a fervent internet community that was also doing similar stuff to, just like following Rich Life and seeing the weird stuff he would do. And there were giant spikes when that would happen, because those would be shared in those communities, which was, again, exciting, but then felt kind of like, well, that feels kind of dirty. And also, like, I don't want to be known as just like, oh, we're the shit talkers, or the ones that are being like, look at this fucking guy. I've recently come to a phrase to describe the show, which is gleefully negative. And because every single segment I noticed after one of my listeners saying, like, hey, have you ever thought about having like an uplifting segment? And I was like, huh. And all of them are just like, look at this asshole, or look at this thing, can you believe how stupid? And I'm like, that's not cool. Even though I'm smiling and laughing about it, like, I could do better than that. So I'm working towards certain positivity goals. We'll see what happens. But yeah, other than that, there hasn't really been any kind of like big like spikes, which is fine. I don't know if that would necessarily, honestly, if for some reason an episode that I decided to talk about, I don't know, who knows? I would have to like really rack my brain and be like, okay, well, what of all the crazy, insane things that I jumped to in every episode, what really resonated with people in this thing? Or was it my SEO or the hashtags that I used? And I would obsess over that. And I don't want to fall in those pitfalls necessarily.
Yeah, you want to keep it as an enjoyable experience rather than get obsessed over the analytics.
Right. Yeah, because honestly, like, I ain't gonna make no money off this. That's crazy. Like, this isn't for anybody. Like, you know what I mean? Like, otherwise I would do I don't know, a Breaking Bad rewatch podcast, but we watch every minute, and then we also watch it backwards, and it's so funny and hilarious. I mean, there's so many ways to just get listeners by doing cheap, weird things that everyone else is doing. It's like, I'm gonna be Loveless in this space, but on my terms. So you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
It's so great to hear that, and it's something that has been really lovely for me to experience hosting this podcast and meeting so many podcasters, is how so many people do it because they love the process so much. They're so passionate about what they're creating, and they enjoy it so much, which sounds the same for you, which is just great to hear. On the flip side of that, I have to ask, are there any sides of it that you detest? I would normally say now that editing, the post-production, but it sounds like you've got that quite down, to be honest.
Which I can't, I still can't, I can't stress enough how much leaning on like learning about the software that you have and doing the best with the type of mics you have is so important. Because I find myself with a dumb, gleeful look on my face when I finish up an episode at that night and have it uploaded to YouTube while I go to bed. Like, it feels great. So yes, just to reiterate, the post production is amazing right now. Honestly, there is that creep starts, because I do live Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. on Twitch. And
can you tell us the time zone for that as well? Sorry.
Oh, Eastern Standard Time. And Tuesday about midday, I'll be like, oh man, I don't have nothing. I ain't got nothing. And I'll look at I have like a Google Doc open, and I'll check it at work, and I'll be like, oh, bingo, you ain't got shit. And then I'll really be like really kind of stressing about it. And even day of, I will have, I don't know, maybe 60% of what is about to happen on the show. And then when I get home from work, I will make a mad dash and start just coming up with ideas and stuff like that. So I guess that there's some stress there, but I think that writing that anxiety and writing that stress works with going into the show, and I think helps like with the kind of you can tell. Maybe you can't. I feel like you can when you watch the show. You're like, oh man, Bingo's sweating a little bit. He doesn't got this, and I want that. I like that. Is this guy gonna fucking eat it up here? Like, is he gonna eat shit on his own show? I like that tension. I like. I think the audience likes that tension. It's the same reason that they liked the previous incarnation with Danny always, trying to trip me up and mess with me and get on my nerves and get my goat. I think there's humor there, and I think I'm just like instinctually keeping that up by being a lazy content creator and not coming up with bits until like the day of. So, but I don't think I hate it. It just does hurt though. It's like going to the gym and then you're sore afterwards. Not that I know how to do any of that stuff, but I've heard um it's one of those things where it's like it's part of the painful process of making art.
I think with the live aspect of your show and with the audience participation, it really does sound very similar to almost being a stand-up comic, and that you've got that anxiety
Yes.
before going on stage.
Yes. That yes. And there's actually an ongoing bit where I'm coming up with my type 5 to actually go and do stand-up comedy, which I probably will never do because that seems like a lot. But yes, yes, there very much is. And I just got done reading How to Write Funny by I forget the guy's name. He used to write for The Onion. And I'm starting. I want to because I'm not a very smart man, but I want to be more smart when it comes to comedy and be like, why do things work? And after reading that book, I'm like, I don't do any of this shit right. I'm not doing this like a smarto. So now I'm like, I should probably read some comedy, like stand-up comedy books. I think that actually might help me a lot. So that's funny that you mentioned that. It is very similar. It's just so I could you can't just turn off your camera on stage though. So there's that. That'd be nice though if you could.
Well, so I think you definitely, although you might not follow the technicalities of the book, I think authenticity comes out really nicely through it. I would say what I wanted to relate to with the stand-up comedy is, and maybe I'm wrong, but I imagine there are some episodes where you just want to turn your camera off. You feel like you've completely bombed. Maybe no one's calling in. Maybe the bit's not gone to plan. Have you had any episodes which have just not gone how you wanted to?
Of this iteration, no.
Really?
And even in the previous ones, there was a couple ones where like there was one episode in particular that Danny and I both weren't feeling it, and we decided to be like, let's turn this off, let's hang out and just get like some food or something and do this tomorrow. We're not in the headspace. But so far maybe I'm a weird, maybe I'm like a sadist or a masochist. Which one is it when you when you like
You
being
enjoy the
hurt?
pain.
Yeah, is that a sadist? Or I forget, but maybe there's a part of me that just again like likes to wallow around a little bit in that shitty feeling of just like, this isn't going my way. This bit got beefed because of a technical mishap, or I pressed the wrong button, or I started talking as my puppet on camera and didn't switch right away. But I think there's humor to that, and I think you hit the nail on the head with what I'm trying to do with everything that I do, which is authenticity. And even though I'm doing bits and there's weird pink slime around me and little weird birds dancing around, like it is an authentic piece of myself that I want to bring to people and ultimately have people be like, yes, we like it. We like you, Bingo. You're good, boy. You're a good little boy. And I'm like, thank you. So yeah, so in those times where I feel awful, I want those to feel awful and be captured because that's authentic. I don't want to just like put my head in the sand.
Yeah, that's
And look, yeah, and it helps also. Again, I can't stress enough how small my show is. Most of the people in the chat I know in real life, so I know that like afterwards, my friend Eric or Tony or Liz will be like, oh hey man, that sucked, but this was very funny and we loved Bruce, and I'm like, all right, well, I'll thank you very much. So yeah, support's a good.
And to sort of pivot a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
do you chop up your long form content and use that for short form at all?
Man,
I didn't think you would, but I think there's a real opportunity there.
I have a couple times, and I can't. Maybe it's just being just completely dumbfounded by the TikTok algorithm. Like, yes, to answer your question, yes, and I have done that a handful of times. On Instagram, they all perform middling and it's all consistently middling. On TikTok, it'll be like so much, and then like 4, and then like, oh god, so much, can you believe it? And then like 27, and I'm like, and the ones that are getting so much aren't even that funny, and I'm like, god, this episode though, this is gold. So I the past few episodes, I'm just like, you know what, I'm not gonna mess with it. I'm just gonna, play a video game on on Thursday nights instead of trying to make social content. If something does, really scream out to me like this would be great, and it's within that, like, really short time frame, then yes, I will. If I feel super compelled and I know something would really work, or at the very least, I think it has value for someone to even just happen upon it and be like, oh, this podcast looks pretty funny, there's a puppet, and then they'll go to it. But it's not part of my, like, my normal regiment of stuff. It's just too, I don't know.
Yeah, it's not as fun.
Yeah, it's not, it's fun when something really clicks. It's not fun to try to watch the episode and be like, oh man, how can I make this 8-minute thing that has a callback in 65 minutes in, and have that work, because that's a struggle, and that's tough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So just as we're wrapping up on time here, I always like to ask all of our guests if they've got any tips for anyone who's just starting out on a podcast, especially as you've almost done 150 episodes. Anything you've learned along the way would be great to share.
Yes. I would say I kind of hit on a handful of these while talking here, but I think the number one is having empathy for the person listening or watching, and not necessarily less of empathy of like your content. Like, if they're people have a from what I've learned, and even just from personal experience, people don't care if there's ums, and people don't care if there are breaths. They do not care, because that's authentic. That's how normal people talk. It's like saying like. How many times have I said like in this conversation? About 65 million. Have you even picked up on one? Now you have, because I know I pointed it out. But it's one of those things where it's like people would rather have a normal cadence of conversation than some weird sterile, we picked through every single word and are presenting it to you as the most professional person possible. I don't think that has a lot of value. I think it's needless work. So it's but then still have empathy and make sure you have people that have good mic etiquette and are, there's not just weird scratchy audio or inconsistent levels, or something pitching up, or not pitching up, but like the, going super high that blows out your speakers or blow out your ears while you're at the grocery store. So that's kind of 1 and 2. That's 2 of them. And I don't, this is another one, and again, I'm not that technical, but just from my personal experience, there are 2 types of microphones out there. There's a what is it? A condenser mic, is that what it's called? And a dynamic mic. And I don't know why anyone would, unless you have a 100% controlled environment with egg crate, soundproofing on the walls, you don't need a condenser microphone. No one needs it. This is a dynamic microphone. What I used before, this is a Shure SM7B. This is a beefy boy. This is a nice one. Again, I went very stupid on this new iteration of the podcast. The Shure SM58 is what you would have at like a concert venue. The person talking, speaking to a microphone. That's perfectly fine. It's not going to pick up your neighbor mowing the lawn or your air conditioner going off, and you won't have to have a lot of weird post production of it picking up those things, or even picking up the person across from you's mic. And I think people go with just these like podcast kits, or what they find at Guitar Center, or what a couple of blogs say. And yeah, condenser mics are awesome if you are in a studio. They're not if you, if you just want to sit at a desk or a table with a couple of friends and use it that way. So again, I'm not a 100% technical dude, but that is what I would suggest. That's kind of 3.
Yeah, I think those are some great tips.
Okay, thanks.
Well, Bingo, thanks so much for coming on. It's been really great to meet you and to chat to you. If you want to end by letting people know how they can find your show, that'd be great.
Yeah, and I just want to say real quick, I really appreciate what you're doing. Like, what you're doing is very cool. It's a niche that like is, I've never heard of anyone doing something exactly like this. And even just as like a selfish, like, this might be the only time I'm interviewed to talk about my creative process, so that fulfilling that fantasy is feels very nice. So I appreciate that. It made me feel like $100. Um, but yeah, my show is called Halfway Okay. It's spelled HALFWAYOKAY. I'm on all the social medias, except for Facebook, because that's the worst. And then on Twitch, I'm there. The video podcasts are like VODs are on YouTube. There's a halfwayok.com has a link tree to all the stuff, everything you'd ever need. Please come by, listen, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Twitch. It's fun and it's weird.
Amazing. And I'll add all those links in the show notes as well.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thank
Ming.
you so
Have
much.
a great evening.
You too, man.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Podcast for Podcasters podcast. If you have any suggestions for the show, or you'd like to come on the show, you can contact me at charlielatham5@gmail.com. This episode is sponsored by Podcast Man, taking the pain out of podcasting. You can find Podcast Man online at www.podcastmanlimited, that's podcastmanltd.co.uk. Thanks for listening, guys.